Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this session of Mayor Dilkin's Community Conversation Series. We're pleased to welcome residents tonight on this Zoom webinar, as well as those watching live online or listening by phone. I'm Dana Cavers, Community Engagement and Projects Coordinator to Mayor Dilkins, and I'll be your moderator this evening. Tonight's format will include a short presentation from Mayor Dilkins, live polling questions, and ending with a Q&A. At any time during this session, Zoom participants are invited to use the Q&A button to submit a question to the queue. You will find the Q&A button in the tray at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Once the presentation is complete, you will be called on to ask your question directly to Mayor Dilkins, and I will enable your microphone. Please take special care to first type your first and last name, followed by your question, and this will allow us to call on you when it's your turn to speak. To maintain the quality and flow of tonight's session, anonymous questions will not be answered. So again, when you submit a question using the Q&A button in the lower tray of the Zoom screen, please type your first and last name followed by your question. We'll do our very best to answer as many questions as possible, so I won't delay any longer. But first, let's begin with a polling question to find out a little bit about where our guests tonight are from. Our first poll is asking which ward you are currently residing in. Please go ahead and on your screen, Zoom participants, you're going to be able to answer this polling question to start us off. A couple more seconds to get a couple more answers. Zoom participants, please look at your Zoom screen now to answer the poll question in progress. Only a few responses that time. Hopefully we'll have more as we go. We'll leave it at that for now. I'll turn things over to Mayor Dilkins to start us off. Please go ahead, Your Worship.
Well, thank you very much, Dana, and good afternoon, or I guess good evening. We're at 7:06, so good evening, everyone. Really happy to be here with you tonight, and people are starting to trickle in here. I'm grateful for the time that you're committing tonight for the next hour to have a community conversation, and that's what this whole night was about, is being able to hear from you and have a conversation about how we can make the city better together. And that's my role, is to help lead City Council to make improvements that are going to make your life better, make our city better, so that at the end of the day, it's a community that each and every one of us is proud in which to live, to work, to play, and to raise a family. And, you know, I look at, I don't have to tell you how difficult the last year has been. And I think the last 15 or 16 months has been probably amongst the most challenging of any of our lives, and probably not a year that most of us are going to look back and say that was the best year of my life, but it's going to be a year you'll all remember forever. And I think of this particular slide just capturing what happened in 2020 with the Unemployed Help Center, really ramping up the support from our long-term care folks. We still had lots of building and construction going on. In fact, a record year despite the pandemic. Community groups and faith groups still finding ways to keep their staff and their congregations engaged. We had the Black Lives Matter rally at the river. The Goodfellows were still out, and lots of activity still going on in the city as we all adjusted and adapted to make sure that we were doing everything we can to celebrate one another, but keep each other safe as we work towards getting to the other side of this pandemic. And so it's no doubt that it's been a difficult year, but you know what? It was a year of response. And I think of the steps that the city took in order to respond to the state of emergency that we are still currently under, trying to address the urgent needs that we had, the fear that was out in the community, not knowing exactly how this virus operated, what it would do to people, how vulnerable am I? You know, people being sent home from work, not knowing when to go back to work. And as I sit in my office at City Hall now, still looking out at the casino where 2,100 people have been unemployed from that location, our largest tourist attraction, one of our largest employers, for over a year. So we stepped up right away. We deferred property taxes, something we've never done before. We launched the Small Business Action Plan. We lobbied the province to say, you've got to cut the time of use electricity rates, because everyone is home right now. They can't afford to pay time of use electricity rates. We pivoted right away. We redeployed city staff. We still have almost 200 of our city staff redeployed to help support at the mass vaccination sites. But this was an immediate response, helping to support things like Meals on Wheels, where overnight, all of the seniors who delivered Meals on Wheels to folks who are shut into their home really couldn't help. They were in the highest risk for COVID, and they all said, sorry, we can't be volunteers anymore. And in order to feed the people that were shut in, we had to deploy our city staff to do that, and we did just that. And thanks to you, events like the June 27th Miracle event happened, raising over 2 million pounds of food that continues to be given out to this day. And of course, another event is coming in less than a week to help refill the stocks there. You think of Hiram Walker stepping up and BASF stepping up to do the hand sanitizer program. Never did we think we'd have to open Waterworld as a day shelter for those experiencing homelessness because of the outbreak at the downtown Mission. And then, of course, isolation and recovery centers. Unbelievable that we even had to consider that, but it was a real necessary reality in order to deal with some of the challenges we saw in the community related to our temporary foreign workers, who make up about 8 to 10,000 people in our community, working across 175 farms. So we responded as fast as we could, as timely as we could, in the best way we knew how, but we need to look forward. So we're in 2021 now, and what we're doing is planning for tomorrow, and the idea is that we're going to build back better. And so our capital budget, we never cut a penny from our capital budget, recognizing that in 2020, we want to get all of those projects on the books, out the door, so that we continue to create jobs. And that's the idea for 2021 as well. We've got a $1.6 billion capital budget, $170 million approved for this year. And you can see the breakdown on the screen of how that money will be spent. And a full little over 30% of our total budget goes to social services, which is dealing with housing, homelessness, child and elder care, employment, and much, much more. We think of moving forward, the vaccination efforts that are underway. Of course, the downtown site that the university offered as a mass vaccination site just closed. We'll be closing WFCU Center later next month and consolidating all of the vaccination sites in the city of Windsor at the former Sears building in Devonshire Mall. And we still have all those staff there to help support that operation. But last year was the summer of recovery. This is the summer of flexibility, where we've got to make sure that we are responding to the needs of small business and making sure that we are continuing to waive all of those fees so that as soon as they can open the doors and have people back in a meaningful way, they're not burdened with city fees this year, because we want our outdoor patios and our restaurants to really have the best chance to survive so that they can thrive. And we continue to do lots of stuff that you've heard about, that you know about, whether we're widening roads like Cabana Road, whether we're building new projects at 80 Knox, whether it's new sidewalks and bike lanes. Those programs have not stopped, nor have our Parks Road and facility rehab and our sewer rehab, which we're deeply committed to, dealing with our $5 billion sewer master plan, and work is well underway in the city's east side as we speak. And so over the course of the last year, what council did is we sat down, we hired a firm that helped us put together an economic development strategy. And we purposefully hired a firm and experts. These folks were actually in Great Britain, but we wanted people who had never been to the city of Windsor before. We didn't want any preconceived notion about what the city's about. We wanted them to provide a pure analysis about the opportunities that they see and what they think the vision is for the future of the city of Windsor. And the only thing that I told these folks when they started is that at the core of whatever you come back with, education must be at that core. We have to make sure that we are looking at education and the war on talent, making sure that we are putting out the best possible talent from our community, and then working to provide them an opportunity for gainful employment here so they can continue to enjoy this wonderful quality of life that we have in the city of Windsor. And so Windsor Works, which was unanimously approved by City Council, talks about 4 pillars. And it's called the LIFT strategy. L for location. Of course, we're so close to Detroit. And what we realized, and what the consultants helped us realize, is that, we've spent a lot of time looking up the 401, saying, hey, Windsor or Ontario stops at London, pour us down here in Windsor. You know what? We'll always look at London. We'll always need Toronto. We're, as a municipality, we are, according to our Canadian Constitution, creatures of the province. We will always have to work with them. We will always need them. But a real opportunity for us here in the city of Windsor exists by looking at the city of Detroit. And I think what came out of the exercise that we did with the city of Detroit, putting together our Amazon HQ2 bid, certainly showed us that we have a great opportunity here by partnering with Detroit, leveraging the strengths of Canada, Ontario, and the city of Windsor vis-a-vis the United States, Michigan, and Detroit. And once, as you'll all know, once we found out that we weren't successful being selected for Amazon's HQ2, the folks in Detroit, Dan Gilbert, reached out and said, you know what, we have such a great narrative here. Why am I not doing with my company what we proposed to Amazon? And so he located a building downtown Windsor, the Rocket Innovation Center, which is growing leaps and bounds. And it really speaks to the relationship we created, but the possibility that exists. Infrastructure is something else that was mentioned in Windsor Works, very, very important part of our path moving forward. It's investing in all of our districts, theming and districting our important areas in the city of Windsor, downtown, Walkerville, Sandwich, all of those important areas and more. And of course, improving mobility and pursuing development that allows us to seize forthcoming opportunities. And that we can speak more about that later on. Future economy, that's really saying, you know what, we are the automotive capital of Canada. Detroit is the automotive capital of the United States. Where do we want to be 10 or 20 years from now? And we know that the word automobile capital is starting to change because it's not just about automobiles, it's about programming, it's about software engineering, it's about building the new world, the new generation of vehicles, which are computers on wheels. And so whether it's electric vehicle battery production, whether it's coding and programming, whether it's research and development, we know that we have to become the automobility capital of Canada, and that's exactly where we're going to go. And then I talked about talent, making sure that we can train the best people here, making sure that we're building everybody up who wants to get a great education, and then giving them a pathway for a successful life here in the city of Windsor. That's really at the heart of what Windsor Works is all about. So there's a couple other things, I wanted to mention right off the top. Of course, the new hospital system, something we're very proud about, something that is getting traction. And of course, the Premier just in the last provincial budget approved $9.8 million that moves us to the second stage of development here on this site, which is really, what it really means, folks, is that we have moved from the if it ever happens to now when the project happens. And so once this money is unlocked in just a short period of time this year, that will take David Mouche and the team almost 2 years to complete the work, to spend that money, to do the design and more public consultation about how the hospital will be laid out, which would then advance it to the next phase. And of course, each phase becomes incrementally more expensive until you actually get the shovel in the ground and the $2 billion hospital is built. But I think one thing we've learned during a global pandemic is the need for world-class medical facilities. And that's exactly what we want to build for each and every one of you in Windsor and Essex County. And so where to next? We talk about our vision and our identity and our priorities, and really it's asking ourselves, what are our priorities and how do we resource appropriately to make sure that we're hitting our goals? How do we leave the city a better place for the next generation? And I reflect on our 129-year history here as a community, and my time in 8 years or 7 years now as mayor is just a real small part of that. But I've seen in that period of time since I've been mayor, but also on city council, incredible growth in the city of Windsor, growth like we've never seen, but for the last 5 years, with the price of real estate, having the largest infrastructure project in Canada, being the Gordie Howe Bridge under construction right now, being ready to move forward on a $2 billion hospital project on the tail end of the bridge. So all of those two public sector projects, in addition to all the incredible private sector development that we are seeing, the likes of which we haven't seen for a long, long time, in addition to population growth, the likes of which we haven't seen for a long, long time, we know that this is a city on the move. And the challenges we're going to face over the coming years is how do we build back better, and how do we prepare the city to be resilient and to be able to adjust and adapt to the needs of a changing population, to the needs of a population, many of whom aren't native to Canada. They're coming here from elsewhere, and immigrants built this country. Immigrants built this city. And immigrants are going to continue to help build this city. And I'm really proud of that and the way that we've helped respond and help people settle here as a community. And of course, it's not without its pain sometimes. It's not without its challenges for folks who are finding a new home here. But I'll tell you, the support that I hear families get when they arrive in the city of Windsor is unlike what I hear in any other community. I don't hear any other mayor talk about the types of things that I hear our community saying in terms of the support they offer. And I think of, and Dana's heard me say this 1,000 times, that, you know, I started off by saying, you know, I'm not sure if I'm blessed or cursed to be the mayor that's had to deal with a tornado, the worst flood in the city's history, and now a global pandemic. But I can tell you and assure you that what I've seen over this last year from our community has only reinforced the incredible appreciation and love that I have for this community and the way they help support one another. Things that you will never know about, things that happened where people stepped up, people with means, with money, people without money who could offer time, and everyone in between stepped up to help support friends, family, neighbors to get through what will be reflected upon as a very difficult time in the history of the world. But we're going to get through, we're going to do it together, and I'm really excited about the future of our city. So thank you for letting me at least start off by presenting a few slides and framing the conversation. And I know each and every one of you probably has some questions. And Dana explained how to put your questions in the queue, and I know she's got some polling questions to do, but look forward to responding to your questions in the next few minutes. Dana?
Thanks very much, Mayor. A reminder before we dive into some of our polling questions to please find the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Type your first and last name followed by your questions, and we are just about to start the Q&A session. So get those questions in and get lined up to ask Mayor Dilkens your inquiry. First, let's start with a few polling questions, or a couple more polling questions. Our next question is, how well do you agree with this statement? The City of Windsor does a good job balancing new projects in the city and maintaining amenities that our neighborhoods enjoy. Go ahead and take a look at your screen right now. That's it. Keep the votes coming. Couple more seconds for a couple more responses. Great. Thank you very much. All right, Mayor Dilkens, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Who is our first question coming from?
Well, I see Stephen Sui has his hand up, and he is involved with the Windsor-Essex Canadian-Chinese community. So maybe we can go to Stephen to activate his mic. Hi, Stephen.
Go ahead. Can you hear me?
You're just on mute.
Is it okay now?
We can hear you now. Hi.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, for the excellent presentations. Well, the first question is about this development of the global villages. Have you heard anything more on that since the last time we talked last year?
Are we talking about the Grace Hospital site?
That's correct.
Yeah, so in fact, I had a call yesterday with the folks at Fairmount Properties, and you know, there's no doubt, I can tell you, there's no doubt that COVID has set them back. They haven't been able to come out to Windsor in the better part of a year, but I can assure you that they continue to work on everything. They had everyone on the call. Everyone is fully engaged. And what I really like about these guys and this company, and having been to Cleveland in the past and seen their developments, I have often said that if the city of Windsor received the you know, I guess from their perspective, the least impressive development, it would be an amazing development here in the city of Windsor. Mm-hmm. Say that we have to take the least impressive. I mean, but these guys, they think and they make sure all of the ducks are in order. There's no risk or very little risk because they line everything up in advance to make sure that this is going to be a successful development. And I appreciate that on this site because the order of magnitude that we're talking about. This development, when done, will be over $100 million development, which is massive, which is a massive development in the downtown core in the city of Windsor. And I know that they have met with your community, Stephen, and they're very interested in the conversation that they had there. They raised it with me, and there are a couple of things that they're thinking through on how to best address some of the information they got from your community, but they are, I would say they are on track. This is moving forward. I'm excited about the direction that it's taking. And although COVID has put it behind a little bit, we see light at the end of that tunnel, and I'm very excited about where we're going with this particular project and what it will mean for the surrounding neighborhood as well.
Thank you for the information.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Thanks for the question. A reminder, everyone, if you'd like to get in line for a question as well to Mayor Dilkens, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Enter your first and last name, followed by your question. And Mayor Dilkens, who's next in our list?
Yeah, I'm going to go to the Lois Baker next, Dana, if we can queue her up. But let me just say to Stephen, which I didn't say when he was on the line, I really appreciate Stephen and the entire local Chinese community, the spirit of cooperation in which they work, not just with me, but with the city and together as a community to be inviting and welcoming is just great. And it has been long before I was mayor, but I've seen it at a different place from this particular chair and a different perspective. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Stephen and other members of that community for all the great work they do to help promote their community, but also to invite others and make them feel very welcome. Thank you for that, Stephen. Lois Baker, please.
Lois, go ahead and enable your microphone.
Good evening, Mayor. I grew up in this city, as most of us did, and I remember the big buildings downtown, the landmarks like the Prince Edward Hotel and different places like that. And the Lido that we had on the west side burnt down, and so many of our historical buildings are gone. And now I hear rumors that they're considering tearing down the old Windsor Arena. And my brother was a hockey player, so we have a lot of memories of that building. If you could have whatever outcome you wanted, what would you prefer to see happen with that building?
Yeah, Lois, hey, thanks for being here today. And I've known you for a long time. And again, I always appreciate your positive attitude and the work that you and Mark do on the Prohibition and the rum running tours. It's a great addition to the city. So thank you for joining in. Plus, you're a big fan of the Windsor Express and go to every game just like I do. And so, you know, guys, I am a big fan of the Windsor Express. I always have been since the day they touched down in this city. And I will be as long as they are here. I love the product. I think it's exciting for the community. And I was hopeful that their proposal was going to be something that we could actually tuck into and see to fruition. But what became really clear over time is that there is a great idea and they put forward a great idea. It's not that the idea is bad. It's simply that there's not the money behind the idea to make it happen unless it's going to be fully city funded. And that's where it became a big problem. And so we have had lots of different ideas with Windsor Arena. And I should tell you, the Windsor Express was offered Windsor Arena when they first came to the city of Windsor, but they preferred to go to WFCU because it was a newer and a more modern facility. And so we've gone full circle. And what's happened in the intervening time with Windsor Arena since it closed is folks broke in, they took all the copper wiring out, the fire suppression system was removed. Some of the washroom facilities have been decommissioned and removed. And so basically there's no power in the building right now. I mean, you'd have to rewire the building to make it work. Not impossible because it's a solid structure, of course. But when I first joined council, the building was open. And shortly after it closed, Mr. King and his wife came forward and they had a great redevelopment proposal. And in hindsight, it was a great proposal, but knowing a little bit more about development now than I did before, I realized today that it was super expensive and the prospect of actually making a go of what they put forward would have been very challenging. So it never did proceed. And then the city worked with the school board, and Mayor Francis at the time brought a proposal to city council to say they need to build, the school board needs to build a new Catholic Central. Can we work with the school board and have them redevelop the Windsor Arena site? And we have a great high school with lots of young people, lots of activity in that great neighborhood. And city council said yes. And so then the school board went off and they tried for a number of years to get all of the funding that they needed. And it just took time. It just frankly took time. And so fast forward probably 4 years or so, now the school board came forward and said, you know what, we finally got our money. But when we've done all of the design work, we realized we really can't make this high school go on this particular footprint. It's just not big enough for us to be able to have the track and the football and everything else that they were funded to have. And so that they moved on to the construction that they're undertaking now on McDougall. And that left us in a different position where we said, okay, well, we don't want an empty building. It's in a key intersection, a key corner close to City Hall. What can we do? And so the City Council said, let's put out an expression of interest and have anyone in the community come forward and explain what they would do to the Windsor Arena site. And it wasn't explain how the city could fund it. It was explain what idea do you have and how could the city be a partner to make this happen. And so we received, I believe, 4 submissions. City Council sort of set aside 2 of them as not being appropriate. And then we had 2 left. One was from the Windsor Express and one from the YMCA. So City Council said, you know, why don't you go back and see if the 2 can work together to present something and prepare something that, you know, really allows them both to succeed. And there may be some synergies there. And so folks will remember at the time that the YMCA was, as this was happening, they were exiting their contract at the ice park. And so things were, you know, a little challenging for them at the moment. So they said, you know what, we can't be involved in this right now, which left the Windsor Express proposal. Council reviewed it, and ultimately council was concerned that the dollars and cents didn't add up. The idea was good, but the money didn't make sense. So council said to our team, go back, meet with the Windsor Express, and try and get commitments here and try and get, you know, things on paper that make sense for us to consider this deal. And so our administration did just that. I met with them personally in my office for quite a period of time to talk about what the concerns were. And ultimately, you know, the submission that the response that the Windsor Express gave was not much different than their original submission. And, you know, the only financial commitment they had was a commitment from a lending institution the commitment was to review an application, not to guarantee the business plan that they would be there for funding. And so council they didn't feel comfortable proceeding in that way. And that's why they suspended negotiations over that deal. So that's not your question, but that's the background. Your question, Lois, was if I could choose what I'd like to see happen there, what would I like to see happen? And I think, you know, that is a prime intersection. And I think multi-residential housing is an option that could be considered. I think a redevelopment of the Windsor Arena site into something that could be very exciting should be considered as well. And this whole issue has brought about others who are interested in exploring. And so I think there's a number of things that we can do. I reflect on the fact that we're next to the Glengarry neighborhood, and anything we can do to help provide some additional life and support to that really important neighborhood would be good for us to consider as well. So I can't tell you with precision exactly what I would like to see, but a redevelopment of that site so it's not an empty building would be a good first start. And with a hot housing market, you know, there could be other considerations in terms of how to activate that space and get more people living downtown.
Okay, well, thank you very much for all the history. That's important. So I appreciate it. Just hope that something can happen, you know, before it gets to the point that it's not there anymore. So.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing we want to do is spend any money demolishing the building. But what council said was at least get the cost. They asked administration, what's it going to cost to tear this down, recognizing that the building itself is extremely solid, but it's not extremely adaptable for a lot of uses. And so we need at least that information to consider, but if we don't have to spend a penny tearing it down and we can find a way to work with someone that will convert it into something useful, that's our preferred alternative.
Lois, thanks so much for the question. Before we move on to the next question, let's do another poll real quick. Have a look at your screen. And we'll ask this question of you. While there are many important issues that we are working hard to tackle, which of the following would you say is of most concern to you and your family? Have a look at the list on the screen. Take a moment to read through the answers and tell us your issue most top of mind to you and your family. There's quite a few answers there, so take your time, read through each. Couple more seconds, a couple more votes. Great. Stop it there. Thanks very much for the responses, everyone. Let's move on. Mayor Dilkens, who's our next question coming from?
I see the next question is from a great community partner, Tish Harkis.
Excellent. Hi, Tish. Your microphone should be enabled now.
You're still on mute, Tish.
How's that?
There
Now we
she
can
is.
hear you.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so you see my question there, and we have changed so much in your terms, and things started to happen before that, although we only have really, you know, we're not really considered the blue collar city anymore. Anytime I have guests in or family or whatnot, they all speak about how wonderful the city is and how kind everybody is. But what do you see in 50, everything's moving so fast these days, it doesn't take 20 or 30 years to change the face of a city anymore. So that's why in 10 to 15 years, how do you see us looking? You did speak to the fact that, you know, Toronto and it stops in London, but you know, I think that's kind of changing. I think the city Windsor's kind of changing that. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I appreciate that question. And let me just say, for those who don't know who Tish Harkis is, she's the brand ambassador for Canadian Club. And she knows how proud I am of Hiram Walker and the history of Walkerville and what Hiram Walker did to help build really the auto industry in Canada and the city of Windsor. And I always say, if it wasn't for Hiram Walker, the city of Windsor would be a shadow of itself. And so people, I'll say it again, Tish has heard me say it a few times, but you know, because of Hiram Walker and the success of the largest distillery that's in operation here in our backyard, and the success of that brand Canadian Club that he created, it really provided the pathway for investments into Walkerville that were unlike what you saw in the city of Windsor at the time, being sewers and street lights and fire and police and all of the services are there paid for by the distillery. And because of that, when Henry Ford came to meet Gordon McGregor in the city of Windsor, or I guess the town of Walkerville, or then called Ford City, what happened is they located the first Ford factory in Canada directly next to the distillery, because all of the services could be easily and inexpensively pulled thanks to the work that Hiram Walker had done in Walkerville. So really a great story for the city of Windsor. Really proud of that part of our history, because it has really led to some incredible things. And again, the oldest or the largest distillery in North America. People know us as the automotive capital of Canada. We also have the largest distillery in North America, which has fed a lot of families for a long time. So Tish, I'm excited about that question, because I really see the city in 10 or 15 years from now a lot different than it is today. And I've seen a lot of change in the last 10 or 15 years. We've made, you know, great leaps and bounds, changes by leaps and bounds over that period of time. And, you know, all of the change that we've done, we've accelerated a lot of it, which has been exciting, but we know it takes time and it takes money. And the good thing is, with this city council, we had a unanimous commitment behind Windsor Works. We had them say right away, we want to put a few $1 million in the pot just to get this thing going, but we know we're going to have to do more. And the whole Windsor Works notion was really brought about after GM closed their plant in Oshawa. And I went to my inaugural address and I said, what are we going to do here if Chrysler gives us the same news that our largest employer was closing? How would that affect our city? And I think anyone, you know, some people may have been uneasy at the inaugural address in December of 2018, but if they really stepped back and they thought about what would happen here, I think everyone was generally equally concerned as I was. And I think City Council felt that as well. And so as we move forward with Windsor Works, we brought it to council. We had a great debate for many hours about it. And they said unanimously, we are in favor of this, because we know we need to have the shock absorbers in place. We know that we have to be talent focused, which means we have to have stronger connections with our university and our college, both of which we're really fortunate to have in our community. And we have to have deeper ties with the city of Detroit and pull on the success that they're seeing, because there are advantages. And what Amazon showed us, or what we showed Amazon in our proposal, is that we showed them how we could create one campus in two countries, a building on either side of the river, link the two buildings with a cable car, you know, so that it was seamless. But those are just buildings and wire, right? It doesn't talk about the talent that's inside. And we have so many folks here who, when they graduate, feel like they have to go to Toronto or elsewhere to find employment. That's the situation we're trying to change. And what we've seen here, Tish, over the last year with COVID is that a number of people have chosen to move back to the city of Windsor who actually thought living in Toronto was better. Realized is when they were stuck at home in an 800 square foot or a 600 square foot condo on the 30th floor, that loses its luster and isn't so much fun when you have two kids. You want to go out and play. And so we've seen a number of people, a number that we've hired at the city of Windsor, who were former Windsorites, married Torontonians, lived in Toronto, have young families, and said, this isn't for us, we're moving back home. So we've been the beneficiary of that type of repatriation of folks, but now we have to create the pathway for others who are, my own kids, 17 years old and 19-year-old, that when they graduate, they know that there is a place for them here, because I don't want to be chasing them all over Canada. Close to my kids when they retire. I want them right here. I want to be close to any grandkids they might deliver one day. And I want them to enjoy the same quality of life and experience that I've had, knowing that this is a fantastic place to live. And I say that, and I feel like I'm selling it in some ways, but I just so believe it at my core that we live in the greatest community in the entire nation, because we have this great, small, safe Canadian city. And we have access to all of the major city amenities 10 minutes away in Detroit. And people who aren't from here don't quite understand that. But I know in my 3 years at University of Windsor Law School, 98% of the student body in that faculty are from the GTA, and they're not from Windsor, Essex. Almost 98% of them, after they've spent 3 years going to school here, they get Windsor, they become evangelical about Windsor. And many have moved their entire families here, because they too have seen with their own eyes and experienced with their own, eyes what it's like to live here and see this as a great place. And so the beauty is we have the opportunity to tell that story and share that story. The fear that I think many people have is telling that story and sharing that story for fear that, property prices will double again in 5 years and we're going to be, overrun with people. But we know the market, supply and demand, will take care of itself. We're not going to be able to create 1 million jobs in the next 10 years. It's going to be incrementally and over time. And that's the pathway we're trying to set, is how do we get there and make sure that we're creating the Windsor of the future that will be successful, that will allow people to prosper, and that deals with the new economy that we see in front of us, which is absolutely tech-based and tech-focused, and more about it's about manufacturing too. We don't want to lose our bread and butter, but it's about also being able to pivot and take over part of the space as the economy changes to be more tech-focused.
Very good. And you had mentioned Detroit, and
I have to wait to turn my lights on here because they go off on.
You had mentioned Detroit, and everybody knows since the 60s, poor Detroit has had their troubles, but they're really starting to come back, and everything's looking a lot more positive over there. And so is there going to be any further, or is there going to be additional? Is there going to be more work with the city of Detroit? Or I know not right now because of COVID, but it's that because they are a huge international city, and can we learn anything from the last 60 years of strife that they've been going through? Or
yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. I think their history is their system is different, and it would be very difficult for a city like ours to get into the position financially that they got into. There are just too many provincial checks and balances, and certainly there was a lot of issues that brought them to bankruptcy. And by getting to bankruptcy, it's allowed them to build back better and stronger. And they've got great partners in billionaires like Dan Gilbert and Roger Penske, and the name just escapes me, but he used to own the Spitfires, the Copyware Spitfires. Well, he owned Copyware. Peter Karmanos, thank you. And so, there's lots of billionaires who said, you know what, we are buying cheap real estate. We are going to renovate. We're going to move our headquarters downtown. They bought the apartment buildings. They renovated the apartment buildings, not dissimilar to Hiram Walker, who built Monmouth Street and many other streets in Walkerville and then rented them out to his employees. This is what these guys are doing in Detroit as well. And so their own employees are renting from them, but it's allowed them the opportunity to reinvent these buildings and reinvest in these buildings and make the city core shine again. And so the interesting part with Windsor Works, because people think, well, do you really need a page in the document to tell you that you should cooperate and collaborate more with the city of Detroit? And what I tell people is if I went to our city manager today and I said, excuse me, guys, if I went to the city manager today and I said, who's your counterpart in the city of Detroit? And I went to every department head, if I went to the water department, if I went to Parks and Rec and I said, who's your counterpart in Detroit? I bet you there is a 99.9% chance that they don't know. And it's not a fault. It's not to fault anyone. We've just never looked there to try and create those connections. We have some great connections on the tourism side in our two nation destination. On the ECDev side, we have some pretty strong connections. But across all of those fronts, we need to be connected so that we are part of their thinking, and that as they're selling their city, they can also help sell ours, because there are true advantages, whether it's research credits, whether it's some of the incentives that are available provincially and federally that don't exist in the United States. There are some true, real opportunities to have businesses like Dan Gilbert's locate on both sides of the border and take advantage of the talent pool and all of those incentives, really get the best of both worlds.
Thanks so much for the question. Let's do one more poll before we carry on. There was definitely some hesitancy because there are so many important issues that were listed on that last one. So we're going to ask once again your most concerned issue, but this time your second biggest concern. So go ahead and look here on the screen. It's the same question and the same list as we previously just showed, but what is your second most concerning issue in the city of Windsor today from this list? Please take a moment and answer the question on the screen. Here we go. Keep them coming. A few more seconds. Great. Thank you again, everyone. Now let's move on. Mayor Dilkens, who is our next question from?
Ali Farhad, please.
Ali Farhad. Ali, go ahead and enable your microphone.
Good evening. I typed I don't know, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Ali.
Yeah, I typed my question, but I'll repeat it. Pretty much a comment and a question at the same time. I want to thank you for your efforts on the cross-border vaccination. I'm one of the lucky ones that work in Michigan and have the access to the 2 doses of the vaccine. However, last time I checked with the health unit, they don't have a process in place to keep track of that. So with respect to the government here, I'm not vaccinated, so which is, so I'm not helping the numbers. At the same time, a lot of other people are in the same position. So I would think there should be a process in place, especially for Windsor, knowing that thousands of people work there and probably got their vaccinations already over there.
Yeah, so it's a great question. And, it was, I was just thinking about looking at the provincial website maybe a week or so ago, and maybe it was 2 weeks ago, and the province had said that by the following Thursday, they would have a pathway for people to report this information. And it was not made available by that date. And so I went on to look, actually today is Wednesday, I went on to look on the weekend, and the government website, the provincial government website, just directs people who want to report to their local health unit. We had a phone call yesterday with our local health unit, and I asked the CEO directly about this particular issue. And she told me that there is still no provincial pathway available for them to input the data on vaccinations received outside of Ontario. So the province is still working on it. It has not been released, but I can appreciate exactly what you're saying. My son is in the same boat where he's received his vaccinations outside of Ontario. We'd like to report that so he's properly counted. And I'm sure that based on the number of snowbirds, people who work over in the Metro Detroit or Michigan area, people who've traveled and received their vaccinations, I bet you our numbers go up fairly dramatically once we can get all of those into the system. So as soon as we have information on that, and we are tracking that every day, trying to figure out when it will be released, we will absolutely push that out on the city's social media pages and our own social media pages. And I'm quite confident the Windsor Star will also pick up on that so that everyone can report, because I bet you there are thousands of people in Windsor, Essex, who are able to self-report to drive our own numbers up. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. All right, Mayor Dilkins, who is our next question from?
Claude Seisno, please.
Claude, absolutely. Just a moment. Is Claude still in our meeting? There he is. Claude, go ahead, enable your microphone.
Hey, thank you for taking my questions. I want to start by congratulating you and your staff for the good work that you've been doing since you've been elected as mayor of our city. But how do I start? The real question. Now, I know there's some improvement, being done in the city. However, we are not seeing it in the African community or the Black community, per se. All right. Why I'm saying this is, yes, we heard that be some recruitment at the city of Windsor Police and the firefighters and all those stuff, and we're just not seeing it in our community. Okay, and so that's why I put my question there. I say, what is the plan what is your plan as a mayor of our city to make the lives of African and Black more valuable in the city? If we live here, we pay taxes, and we can't even have a chance to have a job, working for the city that we live in. So that's the first question. And my second question, again, what is transparency through that process at all level, with Windsor Police and firefighters. And one thing that I brought to your attention not too long ago, and I want to thank you for stepping up to the plate, and take care of that business, if I can call it so, is our issue with the Windsor Police. Windsor Police is supposed to be an institution that we're supposed to trust. And I think, from what happened, what transpired last time when we lost this young man at the Sandpoint Beach, broke that trust. And I brought it to your attention, and I'm glad that the next morning you went to the beach and you did what you're supposed to do as the mayor of the city, and following, things that Windsor Police end up doing what they're supposed to do. So thank you for your leadership. But how do we do so that to prevent this in the future? And what is your plan, for giving a transparent consideration to Black and African application at the city?
Yeah, so Claude, thank you for logging in, and you and I have talked many times over the years about this issue and lots of issues, and I appreciate your spirit of positive engagement throughout that period of time. And you'll know, in 24, I'm thinking of 2014, when I ran for mayor, and I was in the basement of a rented hall on Wyandotte Street, meeting with the African community of Windsor, listening to their concerns, and almost unanimously, all of the different groups talked about not feeling like the faces at City Hall represented the faces of their community. And at that time, I said, you're right, you're absolutely right. And kind of the good and bad news was that 30 people, when they generally get hired at City Hall, they work your whole career. And so 30 years ago, our community composition looked much different than it does today. The good news was, guess what? We have so many people who are scheduled to retire over the next few years. We need to have a plan to do this and try and break down any barriers that exist. And so what I did is I went to City Council, and I had Council approve the Diversity and Inclusion Initiative, and we actually funded that initiative and undertook some work. We had our diversity committee engaged. In fact, the diversity committee, chaired by a member of the African community of Windsor, sat down. We brought human resources to them. They sat down and they went through the hiring processes of the city of Windsor to see if there were areas where they could offer suggestions for improvement. And so we have tried to be as open and transparent with this process. And if there are, and I noticed an area myself, and I told you guys when I met with you that I pulled the position of a caseworker from the government of Ontario, the city of Toronto, and the city of Windsor. And the government of Ontario was like 7 pages long, and basically they had no education requirements. It said, here's the experiences you need to have. If you can prove that you have these experiences, submit a resume for consideration. the city of Toronto basically said you need a bachelor's degree or a college diploma with a couple of years experience. And here's the job criteria: submit a resume. The city of Windsor had the most restrictive. You had to have a degree in one of 2 or 3 fields. It would have eliminated a lot of people. It was that kind of stuff that we went through. And I said, we've got to change this because it is unfair for immigrants who are coming here who may not have degrees that precisely match what we put on paper, but their education and their experience would make them qualified for these positions. So we've gone through and we've made changes to try and make that better. We've had our diversity community sit down, our committee sit down with HR and go through the process so that there's a full understanding. And if there were any areas for improvement, please suggest it, because we don't want people thinking that this isn't a fair process. And when I think of Windsor Police and the hiring at Windsor Police, yes, it's been difficult. It's been difficult to get women to apply. It's also been difficult to get people of color to apply. And so the chief, who is, you know, our first female chief and the first chief of an ethnic origin as well, being Japanese, you know, she has a vested interest, and she and the prior chief are making yeoman's efforts to do outreach to various communities, even during COVID, to try and encourage people to apply. And so we would love to hire more people of diversity, but we need you to apply. And that's part of the problem, is how do we get to this community and encourage them to apply? So it starts at the very beginning, making sure that especially new immigrants feel comfortable with police, that they don't have the same feeling about police as they may have had in their home country, that they know police are different here. And so we start at the early ages, but it's also about all the way along integrating and interacting, I should say, with various community groups in our community to talk about the pathway to policing, talk about the education requirements, talk about the fitness requirements, and talk about what it really means to be a police officer, what we really want in an officer. And so they are making, you know, I see the numbers, I see the stats for myself, the board sees the numbers and the stats, and they're very transparent about the work that they're doing. And I'm impressed with the efforts that they're undertaking. But like, as we've said, even in the last campaign, Claude, when we met over at on Drouillard Road at the community center, we need the community, the African community, also to help encourage their members to apply and consider policing as a real career. And I'll tell you where we've made some big differences. Windsor Police never used to hire officers trained outside of Windsor, but it's become very, very competitive, the hiring landscape. And so we've hired a number of officers over the last few years, some from Windsor who left to go get a policing career elsewhere, others who are following a spouse back to Windsor and wanted to know if they could get hired here. And we've been able to hire a lot more diversity through that pathway than just trying to do you know, direct recruitment ourselves. And so we're making incremental gains. It's not as fast as anyone would want to see them, but I do see the efforts that are being made, and I know we're on the right track. With respect to Sandpoint Beach, I did go to Sandpoint Beach, and that affected me. That incident affected me because when I was an auxiliary officer, a position I held for 15 years in Windsor Police Auxiliary, I remember, you know, it was around 1995 or 1996, getting a call. I was on mountain bike in uniform at Ganacho Park on Ganacho Trail, and I received a call from dispatch for a potential drowning at Sandpoint Beach. And I just happened to be in university and also was a lifeguard for the city at the same time. And there it was, I arrived at the beach and a young 14-year-old Black girl had drowned at Sandpoint Beach that particular day. And that, you know, I get goosebumps telling the story because it's one of those things that you'll never forget if you experience that type of chaos in your life, when you see what was happening and family just desperate and trying to, you know, take my shoes and socks off thinking I'm going to go in and try and find her. But not being able to do that. And so, listen, that's why that affected me. And I'm also a father, so I know, you know, God forbid anything would ever happen to my kids like that. I would be just beside myself, heartbroken. And so I felt for that family. I didn't know the family. I didn't know the history or where they were from or anything, but I had driven by and I knew they were all there waiting until their son was found, their brother was found. I went there and introduced myself and just had a great conversation with them. And I felt their sorrow in the moment. And what I said to myself is, you know what, having lived through that sorrow the first time and have experienced that sorrow through their eyes in the position that I'm privileged to hold, I'm not going to wait for the next person to drown there. Even though they shouldn't have been in that area. We can assign all sorts of fault, and it's not about that. I don't want this to happen again. And so to the extent that I can step forward and use my, my passion to try and make a positive change here, that's what I'm prepared to do, which is why, the very next week I went to council. I said, we need to expedite the environmental assessment that will allow us to switch things around at the beach to make it safer for the next family or the next person who kicks the ball in the water and thinks that they can go in. And so that's what I committed to do. I'm about action, and I've taken action, Cloud, when it comes to the diversity and inclusion initiative, as I told you I would. I've taken action in this last budget when I put $200,000 in the budget for anti-racism initiatives, and we're going to have a report back to City Council in July that goes through all of the things that we intend to do with a partner like the Multicultural Council, who is longstanding and expert in the delivery of these services here. And on Sandpoint Beach, my commitment in wanting to make positive improvements there. I'm about action. I want to see change happen, and we're going to do it. And I sincerely appreciate you, the African community of Windsor, and you have always been a positive guy. There's always a smile on Claude Sizeno's face, and I will work with anyone any day who approaches a situation, even as crummy as it can be. You always approach it positively, and I sincerely appreciate about you, Claude.
Claude, thank you so much for your question. Thank you for joining us tonight. Unfortunately, Mayor Dilkens, it looks like all the time that we have for this evening. So I think that we're going to have to leave it there. Would you like to have any closing remarks? Anything to say before we close the meeting?
Yeah, I would just say thank you to everyone who logged in. I know this hour can go fast, and there were still a few questions we couldn't get to. But if you want to send them over, I'm happy to try and provide a response. My email address is mayoro, M-A-Y-O-R-O, @citywindsor.ca, and we will endeavor to get you a response if we couldn't get to your question tonight. And I appreciate you carving an hour out for this conversation. And you don't have to wait for the next one. Simply any ideas that you have, any suggestions you have, any feedback that you have, I'm always willing to listen and consider. The more positive you approach it, the more consideration it will get. And MAYORO @citywindsor.ca. The email is always open, and I love communicating with each and every one of you. So thank you for joining, and let's continue to work to make our city the best place to live, to work, and to play. Thanks for being with us tonight, everyone.
Thank you, and good night.